Hey everyone, SunTide here. Hope you're all doing great. I definitely am, because today in Monster Hunter Wilds is the Summer Festival, and with it they've decorated the Gathering Hub, everyone has cool new clothes, and most importantly are these Woodwoods. Juggle Fire! I saw these guys and I thought they were adorable. But perhaps most practically is that Capcom have now released the second Arch-Tempered monster, Arch-Tempered Uth Duna. Now, Arch-Tempered Ray Dow came with some really cool armor pieces and some really cool new skills. So today we're going to talk about the Arch-Tempered Uth Duna armor pieces and how they change the meta, how they change which builds are good, and yeah, all about that. Now, if you just want to skip to the spoilers, basically the new set is probably going to look like this. We're going to use the Uth Duna wild greaves, which are very strong, but you can change a few things and I'll talk more about that later. Okay, so yeah, before we talk about some specific armor pieces let's talk in general about the Uth Duna set and why we care and why they are so good. So, the reason why the Uth Duna Gamma sets are so interesting is that, like the Ray Dow Gamma sets, they have the group skill Lord Soul, or Guts Tenacity. So they're probably going to give the same group skill to all of the Arch-Tempered Apex monsters, but this skill is very strong. When you have three Gamma pieces, we get Guts Tenacity, and this gives us a 1.05 times raw damage multiplier, and this is absolutely crazy. It's probably the best set bonus or group skill in the game for damage, which is very nice. In addition to that, it also gives us some extra survivability. It lets us survive a hit if we're on high enough HP. If we do survive the hit, we lose the 1.05 times raw damage multiplier, but still having this raw damage multiplier and this sort of like extra hit to survive is very good, and whenever we card we get the 1.5 times multiplier back, so yeah, it's just a very strong, and it's going to be the main reason why we're going to use the Uth Duna Gamma pieces. It gives us an alternative to the Ray Dow Gamma pieces to get this sort of 3-piece minimum we need to get Guts Tenacity, which is very nice. Now, the Uth Duna Gamma pieces, like all of the Uth Duna pieces, also have a set bonus called Protective Veil, or Uth Duna's Cover. So, Protective Veil 1, if we have two Uth Duna pieces, gives us plus 25 defense for 3 minutes after we first put on a mantle. So plus 25 defense in practice is going to be something like 5% less damage, which is actually pretty significant. Like, that should actually let us survive some extra hits. If we get 4 pieces, we get Protective Veil 2, which gives us plus 50 defense, which is a lot more, 10% extra survivability. It also gives us plus 12 resistance, which should make us immune to most blights, and give us even more survivability, which is really nice. So yeah, in theory, it's a pretty good set bonus. In practice, though, it is a bit lacking. Having a 3-minute duration is usually pretty nice, but if we can only activate it whenever we put on a mantle, and the mantles have like 10-minute cooldowns, the uptime for this skill is pretty bad. In addition, in terms of defensive set bonuses / group skills, the sort of gold standard is Fortify, which gives us much better survivability and also gives us damage. The weird thing with defensive skills is that if we need a defensive skill, we've probably carded, and if we've carded, we just want to use Fortify. So yeah, Uth Duna's Cover is sort of just outclassed by Fortify. One thing that could have been interesting is that Protective Veil 2 gives us resistances, and resistances, if you use accurate weapons, boost our thunder attack. The problem is that each of these Uth Duna Gamma pieces give us a -3 resistance, which means that if we have 4 pieces to get Protective Veil 2, we get -12 Thunder Resistance, which is just completely cancelled out by Protective Veil 2, so this skill has like anti-synergy with the Lagiakr's weapons, so yeah, that's a bit fortunate. Basically what this means is that the survivability is nice, but it's never going to make a huge difference in how we change our builds. We're going to want to mostly be using this for the group skill, which is shared with the Ray Dow Gamma pieces. That, and the armor skills it comes up with. So each of these armor pieces have different skills, but the skills that they're going to have are going to be Peak Performance, Earplugs, Tool Specialist, Agitator, and Quick Sheathe. Some which are very good, some which are less good. So Peak Performance is a damage boosting skill, but unfortunately it's probably one of the worst damage boosting skills. So what the skill does is it boosts our attack if we are on maximum health. The problem is that with chip damage or whatever else, it's really hard to maintain maximum health a lot of the time. And even if we do, the attack bonus isn't great. Peak Performance 1 only gives us +3 attack, which is really, really low. You need a lot of peak performance for this skill to be worth it. So yeah, probably one of the worst damage boosting skills, unfortunately. We also have the skill Earplugs. So Earplugs makes us immune to monsters' roars. This is a nice quality of life / utility skill. In practice, if we're playing well though, we probably aren't going to want to use it for most weapons. A lot of weapons have nice ways to deal with roars. You know, the longsword has foresight slashes, things like the lance have guards, which can activate offensive guard. So yeah, most weapons aren't going to like this, but it is a nice utility skill if you want to use these really long combos on things like the hammer or the greatsword, I suppose. We also have the skill Quick Sheathe. Now, Quick Sheathe is loved by longswords because it lets us use attacks faster, it lets us get into our EI Spirit Slash much easier, which is very good. But honestly, every weapon likes it to some extent. Being able to put our weapon away faster means we can use items faster, which means we can heal faster, and therefore get back to attacking faster. So yeah, Quick Sheathe is actually pretty nice, mostly for longswords, but decent for everyone. The two last skills are going to be Agitator. So Agitator is probably one of the best damage boosting skills in the game. It gives us higher roll and higher affinity if a monster is enraged, and monsters should be enraged pretty frequently. So Agitator, one of the best damage boosting skills in the game. Very, very nice skill on the Uth Duna set. And lastly, we have Tool Specialist. Now actually, in addition, the Uth Duna certificates that you get from defeating 80 Uth Duna can let you upgrade your Tool Specialist charm from level 3 to level 4. So I would say it's sort of like Uth Duna's signature skill. And I was actually going to give like a mini deep dive Tool Specialist in this video, but then I realized I was probably the only person in the world who cared about this. And even I was getting bored trying to recite this, so we'll just skip through that. Basically, the main summaries / fun facts of Tool Specialist / mantles is that 1, you know how when you put on the mantle and it runs out, it stays on for a while? While it stays on, even if it's not doing anything, the cooldown does not count down, okay? So you need to actually remove the mantle for the cooldown to start, which is pretty weird. Tool Specialist 5 drops the cooldown by half, so from 10 minutes to 5 minutes, which means that if you use Corrupted Mantle, which has a 90-second duration, you need an 8-minute hunt to have Corrupted Mantle activate twice, which is doable, but you know, not always going to happen, especially in faster hunts, which is unfortunate. And even if you do this in this sort of like best case scenario, you'll get around a 2.7% damage bonus, at least for longsword calculations, which is pretty good, but not worth like 5 points in a skill. So Tool Specialist 5, very funny option, probably would have been really good pre-Corrupted Mantle nerf a few patches ago, but as is, it's an interesting option, but yeah. That is my summary of what would have been a Tool Specialist deep dive that I got bored of halfway through. Let's talk about the armor pieces in general. So, the helm has two slots, Peak Performance 2 and Earplugs 1, which is pretty nice. The chest has no slots at all, which is unfortunate, but Peak Performance 3 and Earplugs 2. The arms have a 2 slot, Tool Specialist 3 and Agitator 1. The waist has 2 3 slots, which is pretty good, along with Tool Specialist 2. And the legs have 2 1 slots, a 3 slot, Quick Sheathe 3, and Agitator. Okay, so it's important to know, but to properly understand how good the Uth Duna piece is though, we should compare it to other sets. And I want to compare it here to the AT Raydao sets, because they both have that awesome group skill, Lord Soul / God's Tenacity. The real reason we want to use Uth Duna is just so we have an alternative option to get Lord's Soul. So yeah, we really should compare it to the AT Raydao pieces to figure out what's the best way to get this group skill. And if you look at some of the pieces, it's very obvious which one is better. You look at the helm, for example, the Uth Duna helm has 2 slots for damage, which you can use for Max Smite or Counter Strike, but the Raydao helm has a 3 slot, so way more options, and Witness Exploit, and a Max Smite 1. So we sort of have more damage skills on the Raydao helm than we do on the Uth Duna helm. Same deal for everything else. So the Uth Duna chest has no good damage skills, whereas the Raydao's chest has latent power 3, which is at least pretty nice. The Uth Duna arms has a 2 slot and Agitator 1, so 2 good damage skills, but the Raydao arms have 2 3 slots, so you can get Agitator and another skill on top of that. Okay, so it's not looking good for the Uth Duna pieces. But let's look at the waist. So the Uth Duna waist has 2 3 slots, which you can use for any skill in the game, which is very nice. but the Raidao waste has 2 latent power and 2 maximites, so it still loses out. But the last piece is very, very good. The legs for Uth Duna, in terms of just damage, has a 3-slot and Agitator 1, whereas Raidao has only a 3-slot. So, for once, Uth Duna comes out with the advantage. It does only have 2 damage skills, but it makes up for that in having a lot of really good quality of life skills, okay? It has Quick Sheathe 3, which Longsword is which Longsword is love, I should say, and everyone else at least Sword appreciates, but also has 2 1-slots, which is really good for other skills, especially now with Lagakr's weapons. You can more easily get Thunder Resistance for Convert Thunder Res to get more attack that way. So, yeah, the legs, the Uth Duna Wild Greaves, I think they're called, are actually really, really good, and probably the only really good piece that we're getting from Uth Duna. Okay, so with that being said, we can finally talk about the new optimal meta builds for Monster Hunter Wilds after the release of AT Uth Duna. So, in practice, a lot of the optimal raw builds have now been superseded with builds that use the Uth Duna Wild Greaves. And there are 2 main ways of using the armor, and all of those you can change the decorations in a few different ways depending on our specific playstyle. Now, it's worth saying that compared to the builds I showed in my previous video, we aren't actually getting any more damage, but we're getting a whole lot of more utility and quality of life skills that could directly increase our damage. We go from having 2 1-slots to having 5 1-slots in Quick Sheathe 3, or 4 1-slots, Quick Sheathe 3, and Stamina Surge 2, which is a really, really good improvement just for our overall gameplay. Okay, so let's talk about the actual armor pieces we use. So this on screen right now is going to be one of our options. We're going to use the Lagakr's Helm and Coil, and use the AT Raidao Mail and Braces, along with the new Duna Wild Greaves. Now, this one gets us 5 free 1-slots, along with Quick Sheathe 3 for utility, along with getting some great damage skills in Weakness Exploit 5, Maximize 3, Latent Power 3, Counter Strike 3, Agitator 2, and Burst 1, so some really good options. Now, we have a lot of slots in this build which we can change depending on our playstyle. So if we don't want to use the skill Weakness Exploit, for example, if we're fighting a monster where we want to use Mind's Eye on, then you can swap out the Weakness Exploit and the Talisman and the decorations to get Agitator 5. So we just swap out the Weakness Exploit Charm with an Agitator Charm, swap out the Weakness Exploit decorations for another Agitator Charm, making our lost 3-slot on something like Latent Power to get more damage that way. So that's an option if you want to use Mind's Eye. If you want to use Adrenaline Rush, we can slot 1 point of that. So in the actual build on screen, you can just swap out 1 point of Agitator for that. If you did what I said earlier and swap it out Weakness Exploit, we can use our sort of last skill on Adrenaline Rush. So it's pretty easy to get Adrenaline Rush 1, and that becomes optimal if we can obtain an uptime of around 40%. So basically, if you have 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, then having 1 point of Adrenaline Rush is actually pretty good, just because that first point gives you plus 2 attack, which is really nice. So yeah, this is your option if you just want more 1-slots, or you want the variability of being able to swap out Weakness Exploit for another skill. If you don't care about those things, then you can actually get Stamina Surge 2 with the build you see on screen. What we're going to want to do is we're going to change the Lagakr's Helm and the Ray chest piece for the Ray Helm and the Lagakr's chest piece. Now, this one does lose us 1 slot, but gets us 2 Stamina Surge, which can be really nice, especially for keeping Maximize uptime up, for example. Of course, if we don't want Maximize, then we actually have Maximize here as a decoration, which means you can change this for something else you want. We already have 3 Counter Strikes, so it's going to go to something like Part Breaker, but that's an option that this build gets you. Now, in this build, you see that the Charm is Latent Power. That's just because Latent Power gets up to level 3 right now, whereas most of the other 3-slot decorations don't have a level 3 talisman yet. Now, in this set, we unfortunately can't drop Weakness Exploit down to level 1, and Weakness Exploit 5 is much stronger than Weakness Exploit 4, so we want to keep Weakness Exploit 5. However, we can change the Agitator decoration for Adrenaline Rush skill, which is pretty nice. And yeah, we can sort of Maximize for something else. So yeah, these are going to be our main 2 options. Personally, I'll probably use a Stamina Surge build if I'm using Weakness Exploit, and using the other build if I want to use Mind's Eye. But yeah, it's going to be up to you. Feel free to use whichever one you want. They're both going to be very, very good. It's just Stamina Surge or more 1-slots, whichever you want. Now, one thing that's pretty cool about both of these builds is that even though you're using the Duna Wild Greaves, which gives you negative Thunder Resistance, because you have more 1 slots, you can easily get up to Thunder Resistance 3, which gives you a massive boost to your Thunder Resistance, which means you can get more damage with your laggy accuracy weapons. So, yeah, even though your Duna Wild Greaves gives you negative Thunder Res, because it gives you more 1 slots, you can boost it up higher to what you could have before, which is pretty cool. So yeah, this is going to be good for any weapons, and as always, feel free to change the weapons depending on what you want to use. After you use your 3 1 slots on Thunder Resistance, you actually have still quite a few options which you can use for whatever you want, especially because you already have Quick Sheathe 3 if you're playing the Longsword, and you have a lot of options. Personally, I'm going to be using Speed Eating or Gobbler to heal up faster and get back to the fight faster, but you have other options. Divine Blessing is a nice defensive skill. You can use more resistances to get you more blight resistance and be immune to whatever else the monster's throwing at you. You get Self-Improvement or Growth to boost your damage if the hunt lasts for more than 10 minutes. You can get more defense to just get overall survivability. You just have a lot of different options. So play around with it and see which 1 slots you like. Again, I'll be using Gobbler, but you do whatever you want to use. And yes, okay, so the last build I'm going to show you is going to be this extra Fortify build. This build is a Fortify build that gets you Quick Sheathe 3, which we never really had before, just because we'd always want to use our 1 slots for more defense. But this is Quick Sheathe 3 while only losing about 2 or 3% damage than non-Quick Sheathe 3 builds. So yeah, this is a nice option if you want to use Quick Sheathe 3 and also all the nice defensive utility skills after your card. Now this is the build that I probably would have recommended for things like the probably upcoming free challenge quest, because when you card, you can swap to this build, keep the same damage and have way higher survivability. But personally I found AT Uth Duna way easier than AT Raydao, so this set is probably not needed, but it's at least an option if you want to use Quick Sheathe 3 with Fortify. So yeah, these are the builds that I was going to show you today. 2 important notes. So 1, this does knock out a lot of the Seragio's builds that I showed before, which is a bit unfortunate because I actually really like playing with the Seragio's builds. But yeah, being able to more easily slot in Adrenaline Rush on the Lord Soul builds makes those better for just small bits of Adrenaline Rush. If you avoid Maximize at all, then actually none of these builds are going to work for you. You're probably going to run into the previous builds, which gets nice affinity from a combination of Latent Power and the Laggy Accuracy set bonus and all the other nice skills that those pieces get. So yes, for most Maximize builds, you're going to want to use these, but if you don't use Maximize, then you want to use the builds I showed in my previous Title Update 2 video. But with that, yeah, I think that's all the things I wanted to say in this video. So basically, in brief, the Uth Duna Wild Greaves Gamma leg pieces are very, very good. Often going to be best in slot thanks to Lord Soul, having good damage skills and great quality of life options, with high points of Quick Sheath and all the free 1 slots to get you Thunder Resistance and whatever else you want. And so as such, most of the raw builds have been consolidated into the 2 builds I showed earlier, which both use 2 Laggy Accuracy pieces, 2 AT Raydao pieces, and the Uth Duna Gamma leg pieces. But yeah, other than that, sadly, the other Uth Duna pieces don't seem too useful. It's really just all the Wild Greaves, which is a bit unfortunate, because I actually really liked fighting Uth Duna here, which is weird. Like, I think Uth Duna was probably my least favorite Apex monster, but the AT, the Archtempered fight, was really, really good. I think it's because they just really sped up its attacks, which meant it felt just so much more dynamic. And especially with Longsword, because its hitboxes were just so big, it was just so easy and so fun to just constantly counter whatever it's doing. I don't know, great fight. What did you think of AT Uth Duna? Genuinely curious. I thought it was way better than normal. But other than that, thank you all for watching to the end. Thanks to all my Patreon supporters and everyone else watching as well. And hope to see you in the next one. Hopefully tomorrow I'll go through the festival pieces and the sets for those. But with that, I'll see you all next time. Bye!